Hello. Hello.
Hello, sir.
Madam, this screen is not visible, madam. Can
Screen
you
is
tell
not.
me? Yes, madam.
Screen
Can you
is
tell me
not.
the
I have
procedure?
not shared any screen, sir, right now.
Okay, 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 okay,
Okay.
madam.
So,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, thank you, madam.
Waiting for the resource person to join, sir.
Yeah, yeah.
Another couple of minutes is going to join the session.
Sure, sure, madam.
Okay.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Thank you. ಬರುತ್ತೆ ಇರಿ ಇರಿ.
Hello.
Sir. Hello,
Yeah.
sir. Good
So,
afternoon, sir.
shall we start? Good afternoon. Shall we start?
Yes, sir. Welcome to the sir. Welcome to the
Okay.
session 2 of Atal FDP. We will continue the session on artificial intelligence and machine learning. Sir will take over the session. Thank you. Sir, you can present the.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
I think my slide is visible now. Hello.
Yes, sir. It is visible.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So, I hope the first session was somehow you could understand that one what message I wanted to convey. So, if you have any things, any queries, or anything related to that first session, just within 1 or 2 minutes, if you can ask me, then I will start the session. So if anything from the past sessions, if you have any problem or concerns, please let me know. Quickly we can finish that and for the second session.
Participants are requested to ask any questions if you have.
Yeah, please. Okay, so I believe that my message was clear to all of you, and you could understand what I meant to say. So thank you very much. So in this session, actually I merged these two sessions. First one was the introduction to AI, and second one is the machine learning. So I merged the two sessions, and I assume it as a kind of a single session. So uh, so in the first sessions, we are talking about the significance of learning. Why do we learn? What is the meaning of learning? What is the advantages of learning? What are the problems in the learning? So all these things we discussed. And as I already told you, machine learning is not at all different from adaptive filtering or filter design. So the moment you are telling that you are designing a filter, adaptive filter, same thing what you are doing in machine learning also. Filtering means your machine is getting evolved, and adaptive, here we are using learning, and there filter, here we are using machine. Okay, so machine learning, through machine learning we can develop adaptive filter, and we can see that your any kind of signal processing or image processing problems can be resolved. So finally, as I told, finally everything boils down to taking decisions. Given an input xn, you are getting an output yn based on the functional mapping from input to output, correct? And that functional mapping is nothing but the designing of the model. So the whole target here is to develop that function, to design that function, to model that function, whatever term you can use. You can say, I modeled the system, I designed the system, I developed the system. So actually you are not doing nothing, you are just doing or trying to understand the functional behavior of that function. So that functional behavior of that function gives you a kind of understanding about the relationship between input xn and output yn. So the whole machine learning or adaptive filtering is confined to that much only. Okay. So anyway, so let me give you another aspects of the learning. So something like that we used to tell, learning is a kind of search problem. So why learning is a search problem? Let me start with an example. Okay. So it is something like this. Let us say, I'm starting with an example. Okay, let us say I went today to a hotel, and in that hotel there is a scheme is going on. Try to understand the scenario. A scheme is going on, and that scheme is nothing but something like that hotel is providing 10 different types of dishes or menus. Okay, that menu contains 10 different items. Okay, and the scheme is you have to pay a fixed amount, and within that fixed amount you are unlimited supplied with any of the 5 items out of 10 items. You got to the scenario? 10 items are there, you need to select 5 items, and for that you have to pay a fixed amount. Now the question is, 5 items out of 10 items you have to select. Now I selected 5 items. Okay. Now after listening from me, let us say you also are planning to go for this dinner, and you also are going to this same hotel, and same scheme is also applicable to you. Now you are also asked, you select 5 items out of the 10 items. Now do you think that the 5 items whatever I selected, you will also select the same thing? No. Yes. Am I correct? You will not select this. You will not select the same 5 items whatever I selected. Okay. Now just try to understand the scenario. If you try to visualize this whole scenario as a pattern recognition problem or a machine learning problem, you know what is your input here? Input is selection of 5 items out of 10 items. That is your input. Okay. So what is the questions you are asking? Sorry. Input is 10 items. Input is the 10 items whatever the hotel is providing. Okay. And what is your question asked? What is the task here? Selecting 5 items out of the 10 items. And what is your output here? Output is the 5 items whatever I selected. Correct? So you got your input, you got your output, and you got your functions or the task. Now the question is, I selected a different 5 items, you selected a different 5 items. So for the same problem, selecting 5 items, we have now 2 solutions. The solution which I provided and the solution what you provided. So what is your solution? Selecting any 5 items out of the 10, each one solution. Okay. So I selected one and you selected one, and both are different. Now tell me, which one out of these 2 solutions is more accurate? Can anyone put a views on that? Which solution out of, selecting 5 items out of 10 items is more accurate? I selected one, you selected one. So yours is more appropriate or mine is more appropriate? So can you tell that? Can you answer that? It is very difficult, correct? Because neither you are wrong nor I am wrong here. I selected 5 items, you selected 5 items. I provided one solution, you provided one solution. So both have provided one solution. Let us say somebody else also goes there, he or she also will provide one more solution. Now tell me, out of how many solutions you are selecting one solution? That means you have 10 items, you are selecting 5 items, correct? So let me go to the board actually, so that it will be easier. Yeah, my board is visible to all of you. My board is visible to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Just 1 minute. Yeah. So what I was telling is that as a whole, we have 10 items. Okay. We need to select 5 items out of the 10. Now, the question is, each of the 5 items selected from 10 is one solution, correct? Now, how many such solutions we have? Problem is same. We have one problem, but many solutions. You got my point? So what is the problem? Selection of 5 items out of 10 is a problem. And solution is selected 5 items. Now, how many such items I can select? You know this permutation combination, right? 10C5. So this much number of items you can select. So each of them is one solution, correct? So each of them is one solution. So getting a solution is not a big problem. You know what is the big problem? The big problem is getting the solution which is more suitable to you. Getting a solution which is more suitable to you. Now I selected one that was suitable to me. You selected one that was suitable to you. So the point here is that for the same problem, you have many solutions, correct? So getting a solution is not at all a big issue. So what is the problem here? Finding out the most appropriate out of that set of solutions. Okay. Now coming back to this slide, is it not a search problem? This scenario, whatever example I just now gave, is it not a search problem? You are searching for an optimum solution out of the existing solution. So learning is nothing but actually a search problem. Fine. So for the same problem, you have many solutions and you are searching for an optimum solution. That is what the learning is. Let me give one more example. If you are confused with this one. Let us say there is one empty room. Just try to understand this scenario. There is one empty room. Okay. In that empty room, I brought my friend with closed eyes. You are understanding my question? There is an empty room. I brought my friend inside the room with the closed eyes. I have closed his eyes. Okay. And what I did, I brought one tennis ball, let us say, and I am throwing that ball inside the room. I'm throwing that ball inside the room. And with the closed eyes, I'm asking my friend, please search where the ball is. Please search where the ball is. So is it not the same scenario as that hotel menu selection? My friend knows that the solution is existing within this room. So we call it a search space. So here in this figure, this blue color is the search space. The possibility of that ball inside this search space can be anywhere, because I have just randomly threw that ball inside the room. So there is a dropping, there is a bouncing, there is a coming back. So many things happen in between. And with that, my closed eyes, I told my friend, you search the ball. So it is not a search problem. So finding the ball is the solution. But where is that ball? This ball can be anywhere. So anywhere is one solution. Okay. So the question here, one more level of question I can ask, the next level of question is that my friend should start from which part of this room so that he can reach to that ball effectively with less amount of time. That is what I am expecting from the learning scenarios. So my friend should start from one point in such a way that he can reach to that ball, because reaching to that ball is the optimum solution. He can reach to the ball with minimum time and minimum effort. Now, can you tell me from which part of this room my friend should start searching? Can anyone tell? From which part of the room my friend should start searching the ball? Are you hesitating to interact? Why it is happening?
Oh, hello, sir.
Yeah. Anybody?
Correct.
Okay, anyway, so there is no such fixed position my friend should start. Okay, so it is something like that. Let me represent those one, that same problem in this figure. So my friend should start from the top or bottom or left or right. Let us say my optimum solution is that ball inside the red color. Okay, now tell me from which point my searching of the solution should start, from top or from bottom or from left or from right. Because my friend's eyes is closed, it's a random search. Because the eyes of my friend is closed, so it's a random search. So random search, whenever you are doing, obviously it will be a random kind of finding solutions. You may end up with getting the solution very quickly. Sometimes you may not get. Sometimes it will take a long time also. So any kind of machine learning algorithm, whatever you can think about, starting from statistical learning algorithm to neural network, deep learning, or whatever modeling or in machine learning you can think of, learning is actually a search problem. So only thing you can do is that you can minimize that effort. You cannot completely eradicate that effort, because this searching is a random search. Okay, so that is why this searching of the learning should be done in a appropriate way. And who will guide us? That learning algorithm, whatever we normally talk in machine learning algorithm, like supervised learning algorithm, this algorithm, that algorithm. So the learning algorithms are they actually act as a guiding factor for this algorithm to reach to the optimum solutions. Okay, so that is why this task of learning is not so easy. Okay, so this one. There is one more examples on this learning I would like to give you. Okay, let me skip this one because no. Okay, so fine. So the basic terminologies we need to understand before going for any machine learning model development. And we have already discussed many things, and I'm just summarized it one. So whenever you are trying to develop a model based on your input data, these are the terminologies which you come across. First one is the pattern, feature, pattern class, training examples, target function, and hypothesis. Pattern you all know. All objects having some features are pattern. Okay. So features are nothing but the measurements. Fine. So pattern class is the name of the pattern. Okay. Training examples through which you are learning. Target function, where you are reaching, and hypothesis, how you are reaching from input to output. That is what your hypothesis is. Okay. These are the basic terminologies normally we use in machine learning. Now coming back to the same thing, one thing I just skip that one. I'm just going to that one. The pattern recognition principles. Now you can understand what is a pattern recognition principle is. Okay. So what is happening now here? When I'm giving a task here as the input, the first task you do, that means a decision systems does, is that it measures the different kind of measurement of that object. Let us say I am putting one object in front of you and asking you, you tell me what is this object. So this is a pattern recognition problem. Okay, so let us say I have I'm showing you one mobile. I'm showing you one mobile and I'm asking you, tell me what is this object. So you know how your brain takes the decisions. Your brain will try to measure the different parameters of that object. For example, length, breadth, width, size, shape, weight, all the things will be measured by the sensory organs of a human being, and that will be the input to your brain. And that is why we call this as a measurement space. You measure all possible measurements. Now come to the feature space. In the feature space, the purpose of the feature space is that you are going to manipulate that measurements value. Manipulate in the sense you are processing that measurements value. So two kind of processings or broad way of processing we normally do. One is the feature selection and another one is the feature extraction. Now why the feature selection and extraction comes into the picture? Why it is required? Because you all know, let us say I'm showing one mobile as an object and I'm telling or I'm asking you, you tell me what is this object. Now can you tell me how many measurements you have to take? How many measurements you have to take to tell that this object is a mobile? How many measurements you can take? Hardly 4 or 5 measurements are sufficient to tell that this object is a mobile based on its length, breadth, width. This is one thing. That means let us say 5 measurements is sufficient to tell that this object is a mobile. Okay. Now tell me how many measurements you can take for this object total. You can take more measurements than the 5 measurements. You may take 40 or 50 number of minimum measurements like length, breadth, width, color, size, shape. Many things are there. You measure 50 measurements or 50 parameters, but you are using only 5 parameters. What for you are using 5 parameters? Because you don't require other parameters to tell that that object is a mobile. This is called feature selections. You have selected 5 features out of the 50 features because these 5 features is sufficient to tell that your input object or input pattern is a mobile. So that is what is called feature selection. Likewise, feature extractions also work. Let me not go to that part. Feature extraction is something like, let us say the measurement, whatever you have taken for this object is not understandable to you. You are unable to understand the measurement. So what do? You do some kind of transformations on these measurements. Conventional transformations like Fourier transform, cosine transform, sine transform, wavelet transform. If it is a time domain signal, you can go for time series data analysis, wavelet transform. So many transformations are there. Okay. So once you do the transformations, what you get? You will get transformed output. And from that transform output, you are going to take the decision. And that process is called feature extraction. So feature selection and feature extraction they are done in the feature space. But let us say there is an object or pattern and 10 measurements you took, and there is no scope for you to reduce the number of parameters. That means you have to use all the 10 parameters, whatever you have measured, then this feature space will not be used. That means you can skip this state. So the whole measurement features will go to the decision space. And the decision space, you are developing the model. And that model will take that measurements, whatever you have done in the measurement space, or that selected measurements, whatever you have done in feature space. And finally, it will give you the decision. So this is how a decision is being taken. Okay. Coming back to some basics of the learning algorithms. Okay. So as I told you, the basic terminologies are like this. Some more terminologies are like the hypothesis space, classifiers, and all the things. So don't get confused with the term. So I'll not talk much about that one because I think this will require some more discussions. So I'm just skipping this one. So coming back to the different kind of learning algorithms, as I was telling in the morning session, We have supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, semi-supervised learning, association learning, and so many learnings are there. Now, a simple general questions or queries may come in your mind. Learning is learning. Why there are varieties of learning? And that too, it's a supervised learning, unsupervised learning, semi-supervised learning, reinforcement learning. Why so many types of learnings are there? Because the model, whatever you are developing, may not come to the workable conditions with one kind of learning. Because this learning is related to your data. What kind of data you have? Based on your data, you have to decide what kind of learning you have to use, and accordingly, you can develop a model. For example, when you use the supervised learning, when your data will have class levels, then we use supervised learning. What is the class level means? Class level is called nothing but the name of the pattern. For example, let me go to one data set, then you can understand what the meaning of class levels in a data set. Okay, just see this data set. This data set contains 10 number of patterns and 4 number of features. Okay, I'm just keeping the first column as a feature because it doesn't provide any information. Correct? So out of these 4 features, I can assume any one of the features as the decision features. And that is what I'm calling as a class level. For example, I have 10 number of rows. So each row is representing one customer. Because this is a customer database, I mean, say insurance company or banking system database. So there are 10 number of customers are there, and these are the behavior of these customers, like refund, marital status, taxable income, cheat. These are the behavior of the customers. Now, what kind of modeling I can do here? Because I am having a class level, that means the characteristics of the behavior, I can use a supervised learning algorithm. So supervised learning algorithm is nothing but a learning algorithm which uses a supervisor, a guiding factor. Whenever there is a guide or guiding factor or supervisor and you are learning, that is called supervised learning. Now, you decide what class level you want. For example, let us say I am assuming that the last column is my class level. Okay, for this example, for the sake of understanding, let us assume that the last column is your class level. So how many classes are there? One class is yes, another class is no. So that means it's a 2-class problem. So a customer 1, 2, 3, 4 to 10 can behave like a class no or class yes based on the refund value, marital status, and taxable income. I hope you are understanding this this particular point. The behavior, the final behavior of each of these rows or each of the customer will be decided based on the value of refund, marital status, and taxable income. For example, the customer 1 will be tagged, will be named, or will be given a kind of ranking like no cheating. Okay, cheating, yes to cheating, and no cheating. So the customer 1 will be no cheating because he has refunded the previous loan. He is single and taxable income is 125,000. Same way for the 5th row. So 5th customer is coming under category yes cheating. That means this person, the customer 5, can be a cheater because the behavior of these values are refund is no. That person, that customer has not refunded previous loans properly. Second marital status is divorced. Third parameter is taxable income is 95,000. Because of all these 3 values, all these 3 informations, I can tell that the customer 5 can come under the category yes cheating. That means this person may cheat. Okay. So who is guiding? See how let us say I'm telling that you learn something out of this database. How do you learn? You will learn that if some person is having refund value, marital status, and taxable income like this, that person becomes cheating, no. If it is like this, that person becomes cheating, yes. So you learn that. Now let us say tomorrow I am giving you a customer characteristics, okay, something like that. If I say my customer, a new customer's refund value is this much, marital status is this much, taxable income is this much. Now tell me, in what category you will put this customer, whether it's a cheating category or non-cheating category. You can easily say that whether that person will become a cheating or non-cheating category. Because why? Because you learned the behavior of a cheating category and the behavior of a non-cheating category from this database. Exactly same thing happens in machine learning also. In machine learning, you have to develop a model giving this data set. So giving these data sets, you can develop the model and you can tell in future whether a new customer becomes the cheating category or non-cheating category based on its behavior of refund, marital status, and taxable income. This is what the whole machine learning is all about. So what is the supervisor here? The class level. Cheating category is the class level. So I can apply supervised learning algorithm for this database. Okay. Now what is unsupervised then? Let us say I do not have the last column. I do not have the last column. That means my database doesn't contain the class level. When my database doesn't contain the class level, the database is called on-level data. If the database contains class level, we call it a level data, and if it doesn't contain class level, we call it a on-level data. And when I am having a on-level data, I cannot develop a supervised model. I have to go for a unsupervised model development. Then you may ask, why that database doesn't have class level? Yes. Is it always necessary that your database should have always class level? No. If you see, most of the real-time scenarios, problems, or tasks in our day-to-day activities, most of the cases, we have database which doesn't have class level. That means almost 80 to 90% of the real-time databases do not contain class level. Now, when you don't have the class level, you cannot develop a supervised learning algorithm. You have to go for unsupervised learning algorithm. That means you are still learning the database, you are still learning, but without a supervisor, without a guide, without a guiding factor. It is same thing to say that when you are teaching inside the classroom, some students comes, some students do not come. Those students who comes to the class and learn, they are those learning is called supervised learning because they are guided by a supervisor like you. So those students who do not come, they also learn, but they do not require, or they don't think, or they don't use a supervisor for the learning. So the student who are coming to the class and learning, that is called supervised learning. The student who are not coming to the class and learning, they are called unsupervised learning. Now, can you tell me which learning is good and which learning is bad?
Learning is actually better, sir.
Which one? Supervised learning is better.
Yes, sir.
But if the supervisor is not proper, then?
My assumption is supervisor is good, sir.
So that assumption may not work also, right? Supervisor or the guide may not be a proper guide, may not be a proper teacher. Okay. So in that case, unsupervised learning is better than supervised learning. And I am telling you, in real-time scenarios, real-time problems, most of the cases, class levels are not there. You know what is the meaning of class levels are not there? They don't have supervisor, guiding factor is not there. Now tell me, having a guide which is not proper is better, or without a guide, learning is better? Which one is better? A guide with improper guidance is better, or no guidance is better?
No guidance is only better.
No guidance is better. So that means unsupervised learning is better than supervised learning. No, that doesn't mean that I am encouraging students don't come to the class. Okay, so that is not the purpose. So what I'm trying to say is that when there is a supervisor, when there is a guide, that guide or supervision should be proper. Otherwise, without a supervisor is better learning, right? So that's why in real-time scenario, we most of the time we don't rely on the guiding or class level, because we are not sure about the supervising abilities. Okay. Okay, now coming back to the another one that is called semi-supervised learning. So what is semi-supervised learning? Semi-supervised learning is the merging of supervised learning and unsupervised learning. Now, what do we mean by merging of supervised and unsupervised? Here the meaning of that, semi-supervised, that means supervision is done partially. When supervision is done partially, then that learning is called semi-supervised. So what do we mean by partial learning or partial supervision? Let us say there is a task or there is a problem which you want to solve and you don't have proper information about the that problem. Only you have very limited informations. Only you have very limited information. For example, coming back to the same example. Coming back to the same example, let us say I want to build a model on this database. Okay. Now, this database contains only 10 number of samples. So when I'm building the model on this 10 number of samples, I have to build this on only 10 samples. Now, do you think that 10 number of samples are sufficient for me to learn about the behavior of a person, whether it's a cheater or non-cheater? No. Then how many samples I require to develop a good model? Here I have only 10 samples. Let us say I'm giving 100 more samples to you. So now you are having 110 number of samples. Do you think that 110 number of samples are good to develop a model? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. In that way, even if I give 10 lakhs number of samples also, this will be not sufficient for you to develop a good model, because the variations of the informations are very changeable in nature, very uncertain in nature. Now, just imagine for this data set, what is your first, let me give you an example of the two rows, just one thing. One thing. Okay, think about row number 8 and row number 9. Customer number 8 and customer number 9. Customer number 8 is telling refund is no, marital status is single, and taxable income is 85,000. That person is a cheater. Okay. Now, what is this second one? Ninth row, refund value is no. That means refund value or that refund feature is same for both 8th customer and 9th customer. So they are same. But even if they are same, their outputs are different. Just see. Outputs for 8th customer yes, and 9th customer it is no. So what kind of uncertainty is this? See, even if refund values are different, same, your same input, different output. What is the meaning? Very uncertain situations. Now come to this another one. Taxable income 75,000, 85,000, almost similar. It is almost similar. So that means out of the three features, one feature is refund, one is marital status, another is taxable income. Out of these three, two features, refund and taxable incomes, are similar, but still their decisions are different. Then who is causing the difference? Do you think that this marital status, single or married, is causing the differences? So a person having a person who has not yet married is a cheater, and the person who has married is not a cheater. Is it the conclusion? This is the conclusion we are getting from this database, right? So what is the conclusion then? Which one is correct? So there is a doubt here. There is a uncertainty is there in these two, 8th customer and 9th customer. So this uncertainty actually makes us to commit mistakes. Okay. So for that reason, we require what? We require more number of samples, more number of examples. So that more number of examples will give us a little bit confidence on our decisions. Fine. So that means what is the conclusion here? Conclusion is more information, better accuracy, better decisions, correct? But is it always true? No, it is also not true. See, the uncertainty are very confusing scenarios. Less number of information is not correct. Large number of information is also not correct. So you need to make a balance between them. So that is where the semi-supervised learning works perfectly, better than your supervised and unsupervised learning. That means you are getting supervision partially from the level data and getting supervision from on-level data. Because as I told you, real-time scenarios contains, most of the real-time scenario database contains on-level data. So which data we have more, on-leveled or leveled? We have on-level data 80% almost, whereas only 20% data are leveled. And 20% level data are not sufficient to develop a good model. So what to do then? You cannot, neither you can use your supervised algorithm, nor you can use your unsupervised algorithm. So you should go for semi-supervised learning algorithm. Okay, so this is how a supervised learning algorithms are defined. So let me just keep that one. The other ones are reinforcement learning algorithm, association learning algorithm, and all the things are like that. So you just can see that one. So I don't, I'm thinking of skipping this one. Okay, so time is not there to talk about more on the association learning and reinforcement learning. Anyway, supervised learning we sometimes call as a classifications. Okay, this term I think you have heard about that one, classifications. And unsupervised learning we call it a clustering or segmentation. Okay, so all these different steps normally comes into the picture when you are talking about the supervised learning algorithms. Okay, you have to make a data collections, representations, modeling, estimation, and model selections. These are the different steps of supervised learning. And finally, one statement is there: each of these steps can make or break the learning outcomes. That means you should not see any of these steps as casually. What I mean to say that you need to put equal importance to each and every steps. You should not tell that data collection I should be more careful for data collection or less careful for representation, or more careful for estimation or less careful for model. No, you have to equally give importance to all steps. Then only you can develop a good model. Okay, so this is how a learning supervised learning algorithm works. So your class levels and all the things develop a machine learning, and finally you are ending up with this one. I'm not going to talk more about this one because some more maybe tomorrow or day after tomorrow speakers will talk about more on the supervised learning and the different kind of algorithms. Okay. So likewise, I'm skipping this one. So unsupervised learning, as I told you, see, there is no class levels are there. Okay, so that is why it is called unsupervised learning. Fine. And association semi-supervised learning is like this. Now we'll go for the basic mathematics of the machine learning. Okay. So if you are having any doubts, please let me know. Then I'll switch over to the mathematical foundations or basic mathematics, whatever you require to work on machine learning, that we'll discuss. So 5 minutes, we'll just have a discussions. If you are having any doubts, please let me know. Do you have any doubts? Please let you can ask now.
Participants, if you have any doubts or queries, you can ask. You can unmute yourself and you can ask the question.
Because that basic mathematics part will require the board, so I'm not sharing this one. I'll just directly show my boards. So from my boards only, I'll just talk about. Okay. So 5 minutes I am giving you for the discussion interactions, and then we'll switch over to the basic math. Okay, so I'm stop sharing. So you can ask me any questions if you are having.
Participants are requested to ask doubts if you have.
Sir, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
So suppose we are a newcomer to the machine learning and we are not sure about which method to go on, whether to supervised learning or unsupervised learning. So how do we decide about this, sir?
Can you please repeat your questions once more?
Yes. So if a person is starting newly in this field of machine learning and he's not sure about whether to start with supervised or unsupervised learning, so on what parameters do we have to judge, like which learning method we have to choose, sir? Supervised or unsupervised or any other methods?
Because as I told, no, see, you need to first see what your data set is, what your model is expecting from you. Okay, so something like that. Let us say first decide what is your database. Your database contain class level or not? First decide that.
Okay, sir.
So if your database contain class level, then you need to go for supervised learning. If your database doesn't contain class level, then you don't have any other options. You have to go for unsupervised learning. Let us say your database has very few number of samples at the class levels, then you should go for semi-supervised learning, so that your database will tell you what kind of learning you should go for.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
Sir, there is one question from Jayapata. What is the major difference between classification and clustering?
Yeah, exactly. It is an extension to these previous questions. The classification and clustering. When you are developing supervised learning algorithm, it is called classification. When you are developing unsupervised learning algorithm, it is called clustering. So all the things depends on whether your database contain class level or not. If it contains class level, it's a classification algorithm. If your data set doesn't contain class level, it's a clustering algorithm. So your database will tell you what kind of algorithm you are going to use.
Okay, sir. Any other questions from the participants? Hello. So that's it, sir. Nobody is asking any questions. You can continue, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
My board is visible?
Hello, excuse me, sir.
Yeah, my board is visible to all of you?
No, sir. And there is a question from Anand Kumar, sir. One more question is there.
Yeah, please.
Can I ask? Okay. Sir, existing challenges in classification and clustering. What are the existing challenges in classification and clustering?
Existing challenge, you are asking for classification or clustering?
Both.
Okay. So the existing challenge, if I want to summarize in 1 or 2 points, that will be like this. See, there is always a challenge for in any kind of model development. Okay.
Yes, sir.
In supervised learning, the challenges are something like this. Your class level are not appropriate. Your class levels are not appropriate in the sense, as I told, I was showing you one examples, like, so the customer, 8th customer and 9th customer, are they coming to the category of cheating or non-cheating category? Now, it is very difficult to say that whether that customer is a cheater or non-cheater based on these 3 informations. So the first challenges of supervised algorithm is availability of level data. You need unlimited number of level data to develop a good model, which is practically impossible. So this is first challenge. Second challenge is, how many classes are there? How many classes you should consider in development of the model? Like for example, in the same database, there are how many classes are there? 2 classes. You remember the data sets, right? That customer data set. One class was yes, another class was no. So do you think that our banking sector or the insurance sector, they only consider binary decision, yes or no? Do they consider binary decisions? They don't consider. They don't consider that this person, this customer is eligible or not eligible. Apart from that, they also consider something else. Possibilities of eligibility, possibilities of non-eligibility, scoring. That scoring can be 0 and 1. That is what called 2-class problem. 0 means not eligible. 1 means completely eligible. But our decisions are not like binary decisions. So our decisions sometimes in between these 2 decisions, yes and no. Let us say some customer ranking is 0.5. Instead of 0 and 1, some customers decisions you are getting at 0.5. What do you say? This person or the customer will come under yes category or no category? It is difficult to say. So finally, what I am trying to say is that number of classes actually very uncertain to say. How many number of classes are there? 2, 3, 4, 5. This is an one more challenge. Another challenge. What kind of supervised learning algorithm you should use? It is not that one supervised learning algorithm is sufficient, or there is a existence of one supervised learning algorithm. There are n number of supervised learning algorithms. Even if you have sufficient number of samples, sufficient number of level samples, you will be confused to see that which algorithm will work for me, because your data sets are not completely understandable. There are uncertainties there, impreciseness is there. So whether you should use some statistical algorithm or computational intelligence algorithm, like fuzzy set theory, rough set theory, neural network, so many algorithms are there. So this is how you need to see what kind of learning algorithms will be more suitable. But I would like to say your data set from the beginning will give you some kind of idea about the use of learning algorithms or use of development of the algorithms. I hope I could answer your queries, right?
Thank you, sir. There is one more question, sir, from
Yeah, please.
Manoj.
Please.
When we consider supervised and unsupervised method,
Okay.
which will yield more accuracy in classification of images?
Very, very tricky questions, madam. It is very difficult. I don't have any prompt answer for that one, and in fact, no one can answer these questions, because it all depends on how much level of satisfactions you will have.
Okay.
Let us say I am telling that I can provide you 50% accuracy. Will you be happy? Or if I provide you 60% of accuracy, will you be happy? Which one will you be happy? So that all depends on what kind of problem you have and what kind of solution you are expecting. Sometimes what happens, I may be happy with 50% accuracy. Then why shall I go for 60% accuracy? Because going from 50 to 60% accuracy, I need to pay more money and effort. Okay, so it all depends on what kind of algorithm will be more accurate and all the things. You need to say where you are happy. That's why I told you right from the beginning, you should have some kind of intuitions. What you are expecting? Are you expecting 80% accuracy or 60% accuracy? Now, if your target is fulfilled, then you are happy. Then you stop that one, because more is the accuracy, more is the complexity. Okay.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Sir, no other questions from the participants. You can continue, sir.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So another 35 or 40 minutes we'll talk about this basics of machine learning. Now my slide board is visible to all of you.
Not now, sir.
Okay, I'm sharing that one. I think I need to share that.
Yes, sir.
Okay, now my board is visible. Now the board is visible to all of you.
No, sir, not at all.
Yes, sir.
Now it is visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
Okay. So the outline will be something like this. We'll be discussing little bit mathematics. Okay, don't get scared about this mathematics part, because in fact this mathematics is a scary one, right? I also scared of this mathematics, but I would like to know those mathematics which are required for machine learning. I don't need to go for I mean very deep of mathematics. Okay, that is not required. So our class 10th level or 10+2 level mathematics, that is sufficient to work for machine learning. And I believe we all have gone through this class 10 and 10+2 mathematics. Okay. Now only thing is that we need to link between them. We need to link between them. That means we all have done mathematics, but theoretically we know that one. Theoretically we know what is mathematics and what is the use of that mathematics. Now we will try to establish a relationship between the theoretical mathematics and its practical applicability. Okay, and the moment you can do that one, then you can use that mathematics for machine learning. Okay. Now one may simply ask, why do I require mathematics to work on machine learning? Very simple and basic questions. Why do I require mathematics to work for machine learning? Can anyone answer that? Why do I require mathematics at all? Without mathematics, can I not work with machine learning?
Sir, probability.
No, there are several probabilities are there, but where to use the probability and all the things, that is what we are going to discuss here. Okay, see, basic way, in a very preliminary level, if I want to tell, why do I require mathematics at all to work on machine learning, it is something like this. What is our purpose here? Our purpose is not that a human brain is working and human brain is taking the decisions. What is our purpose here? Our purpose is to make a machine in such a way that it will work like a human brain. That is what our purpose is. So we are expecting a machine to work for us. We are expecting a machine should work like a human brain. Okay, this is what our purpose of machine learning. That is very clear. There is no doubt or there is no ambiguity on that. Correct? Now the question is, you are developing a machine or modeling a machine or designing a machine. And what is the meaning of machine? That we have already discussed. Machine is nothing but a system, a hardware system. Okay. Now I can assume that my computer is also a machine. Okay. Now let us strict our understanding that I have a computer which is acting like a machine and which is going to work for me like a human being. Clear? Now, do you think that whatever I am telling to the machine, like that means that the computer can understand me? Computer cannot understand me. So what computer understands? Computer can only understand numbers 0 and 1 and the numbers which are defined with 0 and 1. Nothing else. It cannot understand anything beyond 0 and 1. Now what is 0 and 1 and the combination of 0 and 1? They are numbers. That means I need to incorporate the information. Let us say I am giving some task to machine or computer. Okay. So that information, that input has to be incorporated to the numbers. And that numbers, if I provide to machine will understand me now. Correct? Machine will start understanding me through the number. It cannot understand anything beyond the number. What I did, I incorporated my information inside the number and I feed that number to computer. Computer now can understand the number and it can understand the information, whatever I provided. Okay. Now, one more thing. Okay. Now, computer started understanding the number. Is it sufficient? That just you put the number inside the computer and computer will start deciding or computer will start providing the solution? No. It has to process that numbers. It has to process that numbers. Now, when it processes that numbers, who will help? Who can process the numbers? We have to use mathematics. Without mathematics, we cannot process the numbers. Processing the numbers means manipulations or changing or using. So we are just now playing the numbers. Who can play numbers correctly? Mathematics can play the number correctly. Okay. So that is why we require mathematics. Now the question is, in what way mathematics has to be used so that that number can be processed in a proper way? In what way we should use that one? So that is where the role of mathematics comes into the picture. Okay. So if you can utilize that mathematics in a proper manner to the number, that means you are processing the information whatever you have given to the computer. And the moment you can process these numbers to the computer, your computer can take a decision. So that is why we require mathematics. Okay. So I believe you got the motivations. Why should we use mathematics? Without mathematics, there is no definition of machine learning. But you don't need to go to that level of mathematics so that you will be lost somewhere. Okay. So you don't need to be a mathematician or expert in mathematics. So we need to understand very basics level. Okay. So the first thing what we need to understand is that linear algebra. Okay. Second one is that calculus. Third one is probability theory. So these are the three basic components of mathematics which we are going to use so that we can work on machine learnings. So first of all, we need to understand what these operations are doing so that it is helpful for machine learning. Okay. So before going to that, that part, let us say, let us try to understand what is linear algebra. I believe you all understand what is the meaning of linear algebra. So in a mathematics point of view, if I want to define what is linear algebra, so what is a linear algebra? It is a one kind of mathematics which is concerned with vectors, matrices, and scalars. So the linear algebra is nothing but scalar, vector, and matrix. Linear algebra is nothing but working with scalar, vector, and matrix. So we'll come to that scalar, vector, and matrix a little bit later on. So let us understand a little bit more about the linear algebra. So we all have understood what is a scalar, vector, and matrix, but we will try to see the practical application of this concept, linear algebra, so that it will be useful for machine learning. Okay. So as a machine learning practitioner, you must have understanding of linear algebra. It is must. You cannot avoid this. Okay. So if you want to work on machine learning, I suggest please go through this linear algebra components. Okay. You all have already read that one, but you need to just refresh your brain. Okay. So again, this is not a small field. The scalar, vector, and matrix concept is not a small field. This linear algebra is not a small field. It's a very vast field. But you don't need to go to that level of understanding. A preliminary level of scalar, vector, and matrix is sufficient to work on machine learning. Okay. So that is the good news, that we don't need to know the length and breadth and depth of the field of linear algebra. Okay. So in order to our understanding on the application of machine learning. Okay. So what mistakes normally do or normally done by beginners? So mistakes. So what is the mistakes normally a beginners does, like you and me? Because we are all beginners. We have started using the linear algebra for machine learning, so we will be called as a beginners. So what are the mistakes we normally do? The first mistakes we do is that beginners study linear algebra too early. When did you learn linear algebra in your life? When did you learn linear algebra in your life? I believe you have learned linear algebra at the level of standard 8 or 9, or maybe class 10. Now, if you see your kids and my kids, they are learning linear algebra at the level of standard 5 and 6. In ICSE board, they are studying in standard 6. In CBSE board, they are studying in standard 7. But in our time, we are studying in 8, 9, or 10. Or sometimes we learn linear algebra during the 10+2 level. So that will be defined, or that will be called as too early learning of linear algebra. When we are learning linear algebra during our school time, like what is a scalar, what is a vector, and what is a matrix, had we realized those time that what are the usefulness of the scalar, vector, and matrix? We never realized that one. That is why I'm calling this is a too early learning of linear algebra. This is one mistake people do. What is the second mistake? Sometimes some people learn the linear algebra too much. That is also a wrong thing. Too much learning about the linear algebra will lead to nothing. And third one is, sometimes people learn linear algebra in a wrong way. Wrong way in the sense, without the applications, we learn something and which we forget normally. Very quickly we forget. Because unless and until you realize something, you don't remember it. Okay? So this is what the problem of the beginners. These are the mistakes normally made by the beginners. So what we'll do here now, in this today's discussions, we'll talk about, just make it a point kind of thing. We will learn linear algebra notations. We'll learn linear algebra, the arithmetic behind that, and some statistics and matrix factorizations. Okay, so algebraic notations, matrix factorization. You're understanding what is the meaning of notation and matrix factorizations, and some arithmetic and statistics. These are the basic preliminary level we will discuss. So after telling all the things, don't get scared. Okay, believe me, it's a very fun topic or fun kind of items in mathematics. It's a very funny one. Okay, you will start enjoying that one because you have already read those one. Now you are going to apply those things in machine learning. Okay, so once you know that one, things will be very much convenient for you, and you will start showing interest in working on the linear algebra and its application to machine learning. Okay, so it's believe me, it's a fun, and you don't need to struggle a lot to understand this one and its application to machine learning. Okay. So let us start our understanding on this one. Fine. So what is a scalar, what is a vector, and what is a matrix? That we'll discuss first. These are very preliminary things. We have already read, just reminding ourselves. So what is a scalar? It's a single value or a single number. Okay, single value or single number means, let us say I'm putting 5. So 5 is a vector or scalar? It's a scalar. It's a single value. Then what is a vector? let us say I'm putting this x as the x, some variable I'm putting. X can be any value. So it's a single value. So it's a scalar. Now, if I want to make this scalar as a vector, what should I do? I have to use more number of x or more number of numbers. When I'm using single number, it is a scalar. When I'm using multiple numbers, if it is x1, x2, x3, then I'll call this as vector. So notation wise, how do I define? This is x and this is. So if I want to make it as a kind of index, I will say xi, where I is equal to 1, 2, 3 to n. This is how we put a notations, right? Xi, I is equal to 1 to n. So it's a vector. Why it is a vector? Because it has some directions. The conventional way of telling is that either it is a row vector or column vector. So if you write that x1, x2, x3 like this, we call it as a row vector. If we write like this, it will be called as a column vector. And if we combine these two things, row vector and column vector, that will behave like a matrix. So the combination of row and column is nothing but your matrix. So a matrix will be now, it's a combination of row and column vector. Now, how do I put a notation for this matrix? I'll put a notation, let us say x11, x12, x13, like this, x31, x32, x33. This is how we define. So how do I give a notations here? X, I, J. I defines your row and J defines your column. So it's a matrix. We all know that one. But these are the things which will help us to define a understanding about the machine learning. Because why, you know? Because everything, as I told you, right? All informations will be provided in the form of number. And the machine is going to understand that number. So the representation of the number plays a very important role. So if we have properly represented that information in the terms of the number, the machine can understand that number very quickly and easily. And the better the understanding, better is the modeling. Okay. So now the next is with an example, let us say. So the scalar, let us say if I'm putting 5, so it has become a scalar. So let us say I'm putting some value x1, x2, x3. So this becomes a vector. So like that, if I'm putting some 3 cross 3 row and column, then x, I, j, I varies from 1 to 3, j varies from 1 to 3. So it becomes a matrix. Okay. So your database, see, if you remember, I was showing that insurance database. So the data, it's a database. How it was represented? Is it not a matrix? Is it not a matrix? It has some rows and it has some columns. So the representation of the information is nothing but a matrix. So for your model, for your machine, this model actually understands the matrix only and the informations within that numbers, nothing else. Okay. So let us see how it behaves. Okay. Now we use another term that is called features. In morning session, we discussed about the features or attributes. Now I am using one more terminology that is called dimension. These three things are actually same. Whether you call the features or attributes or dimensions, they are same. But they are used in a different way with different applicabilities. Wherever you want what kind of notations, accordingly you decide. Okay. But in machine learning or pattern recognitions, whether you call features or attributes or dimensions, whatever the way you use, finally it tells you the same thing. So what is a feature is? Feature is nothing but the set of informations about a pattern. The set of informations about a pattern. Now let us say my pattern has one feature. Let us say my pattern has one feature. So how do I define that pattern? Because your database is nothing but a set of pattern on which you are going to develop a model. So if your pattern contains single feature, then what do I say? Let us say X is my pattern. It contains single feature, X1. So this is called a scalar pattern. It doesn't have any dimensions. It doesn't have any dimensions because it has no directions in which direction it will go, because it's a single value. Then come to the vector. Vector has dimensions. In what dimension it is going? In a conventional way, how many dimensions we can have? Either row dimension or column dimensions. Okay. So in either of the two dimensions, we can have, or we can say whether it's a row vector or column vector. So we have one dimension in the row directions, one dimension in the column directions. So can you give an example of a vector, the representation of informations, one dimensional pattern or one dimensional informations, which is called a vector? Can you give an example of a live example of a real-time application data which can be represented in the form of a vector, which has only one dimensions? Your signal. You all know what is adaptive filter, right? When you are giving the input, your input is a signal. So how do you define your signal? You define your signal as y is equal to f of x. Y is equal to f of x. If my function is a sine function, let us say. So for each input, I'll get one output. For each input, I'll get one output. And if I plot that one, how do I plot? In the x-axis, your x, and y-axis, it is your y. So if it is, the function is a sine function, that means the mapping from input to output is a sine mapping. So you will get a signal like this. No, it is not a signal. So how do I define that one? Y is equal to x of I, where xi will be defined by a function. So how many informations are there? How many dimensions are there? One dimension, because I is there. Now this can be represented either in the row form or column form. So any signal, any signal, whether it's electrical signal or time series signal or medical signal or ECG signal, whatever signal you can think about. In digital signal processing, we know what is a signal is all about, right? So all signals are of one dimension in nature. Now coming back to the matrix one. Matrix is how many dimensions? Two dimensions. One in row direction, another one is the column directions. So that is why matrix are called two-dimensional informations. Vectors are called one-dimensional informations. Can you give an example of a two-dimensional information? You all work on the signal, right? Signal processing and all the things. I believe you all belong to ECE department. Okay. So signal, systems, filter, all the things you might have come across. Can anyone give an example of a two-dimensional information? The information has two dimensions. Can anyone give an example of a two-dimensional information?
Sir, it's image.
Yes, correct. Image is a two-dimensional information because it is nothing but a matrix. What is your image is all about? Your image is nothing but a representation of number which is organized in the form of a matrix. One is row direction, another one is the column directions. So the image is two-dimensional informations. Now, what kind of operation you use in images? Are you not using the same operations, whatever you use for signal, like convolution, correlations, this Fourier transform, this transform, that transform, whatever operations you use for signal for one dimension, same thing is applicable to images also. But only thing is that you need to process the same thing in two directions. One is row direction and one the column directions. And if you process that, that becomes your two-dimensional convolution, two-dimensional Fourier transform, two-dimensional correlations. Is it not the same thing? So we call that one as a image processing. When you are processing two-dimensional information, it becomes image processing. When you are processing one-dimensional information, it is called signal processing. Can you give an example of a three-dimensional information? Video. Your video is nothing but a three-dimensional information. Why? Video is nothing but processing images or frames with a certain time period. 30 frames if you are processing in 1 second, then we have a problem, right? Our eyes has a limitations. We call it a psychovisual redundancy. Because of that redundancy, if we see 30 number of frames processed in 1 second, we assume that as if things are moving for us. Actually, it is not moving. It is processing of the image only. What is a video is? So processing of the two-dimensional images in the third direction, that is in the temporal direction. That's why video are called three-dimensional informations. So signal, image, video, like that, you have four-dimensional information, five-dimensional information, six-dimensional information. So the number of dimensions you have, better understanding about the problem, better understanding about the data. Is it not the case? Which dimensional information contains more information? A signal contain more information or an image contains more information? Obviously, image contains more information. Do you agree with me or not? So more is the dimension, more is the information. And more is the information, better is the understanding. Better in the understanding, better is the model development. Now, if you keep on increasing the dimensions, if you keep on increasing the dimension to n dimensions, 1 dimension, 2 dimension, 3 dimension, 4 dimension, 5 dimension to n dimensions, then that information is called pattern. So that information is called pattern. Now you call it as a pattern processing. Instead of signal processing, image processing, video processing, now you call it as a pattern processing. So a pattern is nothing but a pattern. Whatever we are discussing from the morning, pattern. Let us say pattern X is represented by X1, X2, X3 to Xn. It has n number of dimensions. So what message or what message I would like to convey is that if you want to be if you want to be good in machine learning, pattern recognition, and all the things, the first level understanding you should have on signal processing, image processing, video processing, then only you can easily understand pattern processing. Because a pattern is nothing but n-dimensional information. Signal is one-dimensional information, image is two-dimensional information. So that is why we used to tell, if you tell I know pattern recognition and machine learning, but I don't know image processing and signal processing, it's a very incomplete statement. It's a very incomplete statement. First, you need to understand signal processing, image processing, because image, signal, video, and pattern, the only difference between them is in terms of dimensions, your number of informations. Now, why the pattern is called n-dimensional information? Because it has n number of dimensions. So what are those dimensions? Are nothing but features. So if your pattern contains n number of features, then it is called as a pattern. And whatever processing you are doing on signal, image, and all the things, you process on this. And that will be called as a pattern processing. And that will lead to the development of a machine learning algorithm. Okay, so I believe you are understanding what I am telling. Okay. Now, once you agree with all these things, these are nothing but the representation of your input information. If you want your machine to make a decision on the signal, you represent that information in the form of a signal or in the form of images like that. Now, after this, then next is that so you understood how the dimensional of informations. Okay. Now let us come to the multi-dimensional information operations. Multi-dimensional informations is nothing but your matrix operation. It is already 3:30, so another 5-10 minutes can I take, and then we'll stop, and maybe tomorrow we'll start this one. Shall we do that?
Yes, sir. Sure, sir.
Okay. 5-10 minutes I will just talk about. Then tomorrow we'll talk about the remaining part of the basics of mathematics. Okay.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So the matrix operation. So the basic matrix operations are, what are those? We all know that. Just we need to refresh our understanding. Addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Same 4 operations, nothing more than that. So you know what is the vector addition. You know what is the scalar addition. Now we are discussing about, because matrix addition, subtraction, these things are little bit different from signal or one-dimensional addition or scalar addition or vector additions. Because scalar addition and vector additions are very easy. Okay, you just keep on adding all the time. But certain rules and regulations you need to follow for matrix addition, subtraction, and multiplications. Okay. So how do we? I mean, very quickly I'll just go to that one, and then I'll stop here. Fine. And I'll just tell you one operations on that one, on applications also. Quickly we'll talk about the application of matrix addition in our day-to-day life. Okay. Now let us say I have 2 matrix A and matrix B, and I want to get matrix C, which is nothing but the addition of A and B. We all know what is a matrix addition is all about, but we need to understand what is the applicability of these things to real life problems. Okay, so if I want to say what is your matrix A and B, it's also a M cross N size plus A cross B. This is matrix A and this is matrix B. So what do you do now? The only conditions is that your M should be equal to A and N should be equal to B, correct? So if that is the situation, then what do you do? This value, I mean, so this value will be added to this symbol, this value will be added to this value, this value will be added to this value, and finally you are ending up with a matrix which is of M cross N, right? For example, let us say if I want to add 2 matrix, something like this, 1 2 3 and 2 1 2 plus, just I'm adding 2 matrix, okay, 1 0 4 and 3 1 6. So if I add, what will happen? This plus this, 1 plus 1 2 2 7, okay, and 5 2 8. This is the matrix addition. We all know that. That means my inputs are given in the form of matrix A and my inputs are given in the form of matrix B. I want to get matrix C. So this is the matrix addition, right? Now let us understand what is the application of that one. This theory we have already read long back, okay, but probably we have not come across the application of this one in decision making process. Okay, so quickly I'll just tell you one example in image processing. You all have TV, right? Television at your home. Okay, Now we are all every day in our offices also many televisions are there. Our monitors are our televisions. Okay. Now, if you see the operations, this matrix additions, whether it is actually happening inside the images or not, that I am going to just tell you. So what is happening, let us say your video, whatever, or images, whatever you are seeing with your monitor or TV, the brightness value is very small, because there are some operations you normally do, right? So basic operations are normally those earlier days. If you want to understand this process in a very simplest way, just try to remember 20 years, 10-20 years back monitors. Okay, then when the cathode ray tubes were there, or maybe earlier days TVs were there. Now so many variations have come. Okay, earlier days we are having brightness control, contrast control, and if it is a color television, it is a color control. 3 controls were had. Now, if you see any monitor or any TV, there will be having many controls like picture, sharpness, contrast, hue, luminance, these, that, so many operations are there. Okay, but basically, let us understand the whole operation with 3 different, 3 simple process: brightness, contrast, and if it is a color video or images, it is you have a color button. Okay. Now, what is happening in brightness? Let us say whatever you are seeing in with your monitor, it is dark in nature. Your video or your images, whatever you are seeing, is dark in nature. Okay, it looks very dark. So what do? So you increase the brightness of this monitor or increase the brightness of the TV. Now, when you increase the brightness of the TV, let us say you increase to 6 point. You increase the brightness to 6 point. Okay. Now, in another monitor, when I am seeing the same information, I increase that monitor to 10 points. Okay. You increase to 6 point, I increase to 10 points. Now, for you and me, do you think that informations are different? Information is same. Whatever information you are getting in your TV, the same information I am also getting in my TV. So inputs are same, but the outputs are different. What for output are different? Because I want this output and you want your output. You want 6 brightness, I want 10 brightness. It is your choice and this is my choice. Now, what is happening when you are increasing your brightness from 6 to 10 or 10 to 20? Actually, it is nothing but your matrix addition. Have you ever realized that one? When you increase your brightness of your monitor, actually in the hardware, whatever it is there in your monitor, there is a increment in the value of the matrix, whatever inputs you are getting. So input is a matrix. If it is an image, it's a 2-dimensional matrix. If it is a video, it's a 3-dimensional matrix. So when you increase your brightness, what your processor is doing, it is only doing some kind of matrix addition. Some value it is getting added to your pixels value. I believe you are understanding the meaning of pixel. Matrix element is called pixel in an image. Okay, so in that pixel, small amount is getting added by your brightness component. The moment you increase your brightness, some values are getting added to your input. If I make it 10 point, some different value is added. If I make 6 point, some different value is added. Now, which one is more accurate? 6 point brightness or 10 point brightness? It all depends on what you want. So in television or in a monitor, this matrix operation is actually happening through this brightness and contrast operations. Now, one thing, how much value is getting added there? Because when your processor increase the value from 0 means completely dark, okay, and completely white is called 1, 0 to 1, or sometimes if you talk about pixel value, it becomes 0 to 255. So the moment you start increasing your brightness, your pixel value is going towards 255 or towards 1. The moment you are decreasing the brightness value, it is going towards either 0 or it's going to the 0. In terms of 0, 1 or 0, 255, 0 means darkness, 1 or 255 means brightness. Okay. So who is deciding that value? Your processor is deciding value, and your increment, how much increment you want, that will be decided by you, and that is the value which you are adding there. So it's a matrix addition or matrix subtraction. Now you come to the another one. What do you do in this contrast? When do you require contrast button? The basic question is, what is the difference between brightness and contrast? Can anyone tell? Basic difference between brightness and contrast of a monitor. Are they same thing or different thing? What happens if you increase the brightness? What happens if you increase the contrast? Do you get the same result?
Hello?
Do you get the same result when you increase the brightness and contrast?
No, sir.
So when you increase the brightness, what happens, and when you increase the contrast, what happens? So first of all, we need to understand what is the meaning of contrast. Brightness means adding some value to the pixels. If the pixel value is 10, if you are adding 20 there, then pixel value becomes 30. So that particular pixel increases its intensity value. It increases the intensity value. So more is the intensity, more is the brightness. But the concept of contrast is different. It is also a matrix addition and subtraction. But what contrast makes the difference from brightness is that in contrast. Now see. When do you require contrast? When things are not clear. You are not talking about the darkness or brightness. You are talking about the clarity. When things come to the clarity part, then you increase the contrast. So your contrast actually provides you more clarity. If your image or video is not clear, I'm not talking in terms of light intensity, low light or high light. Clarity in terms of distinction between one object to the other object. So that is what the contrast operation is, and that is also one operation of matrix addition and subtractions. So we call it contrast stretching, histogram equalization. There are several operations are there. Okay, so when you decrease the contrast, you will see some kind of smoothness in your image or video. When you increase the contrast, you will see some distinction between the pixels value, and that is nothing but your matrix operations only. So when you want to process those kind of image and video, matrix operation you have to perform. So that is the advantage of using matrix addition and subtraction. And likewise, you have a multiplication. We'll discuss about the matrix multiplication tomorrow in the first session, and further things we will discuss. Okay, so I think we'll stop it here, and maybe tomorrow we can join again. So if you have any doubts in this today's session from morning to till now, you just let me know.
Dear participants, do you have any queries or questions? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, I think no questions from the participants, sir.
Okay then. Okay.
Wind up the session.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir, for explaining about artificial intelligence and the basics of machine learning, and the technologies or the terminologies of machine learning, such as concepts, classifiers, and other things, and how to develop a model based on data set. You have explained very well, and also different techniques available in the machine learning, and also the applications of matrix in image processing. Both the session was very useful, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Tomorrow,
Thank you.
we'll wind up the session, sir. Tomorrow at
Okay.
9:55, we'll join the session again.
Okay. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, participants. Thank you.